was one heck of a ride. The last 10 years, one heck of a ride. The Dow had more than doubled. The S&P almost tripled. The NASDAQ almost quadrupled. It was one heck of a ride. We had survived 9/11. We'd fought 2 wars, and we had overcome the financial meltdown of 2008. And here we were back on top. The markets were at all-time highs, still climbing. Economists said there is no reason to worry about a recession. Unemployment was at an all-time low, and wages were rising even for blue-collar workers. And then a virus found its way to the United States, and everything changed. The markets dropped by 35%. Shareholders lost $8 trillion. 22 million Americans are out of work. Businesses, schools, churches are shut down, and 95% of the country is living under a stay-at-home order. Things are tough. Now, there is one bright spot. You may know this, but the government has deemed liquor stores as essential businesses. That's right. Liquor stores stand ready even now to help you get your pandemic drink on. Now, okay, I'm being a little too harsh. There is another bright spot. If you happen to live in a state where marijuana is legal, pot shops have also been deemed as essential. So the government has guaranteed no matter how low the markets go, you can still get high. I feel like there's a Chris Rock routine in here. You can still get high. Sounds just like doesn't sound anything at all like Chris Rock. So I'm being sarcastic, but I'm not being facetious. I mean, God forbid that we'd have to go through this thing straight and sober, and the government has made certain we don't. What a difference 5 or 6 weeks make. I mean, people are worried. People are concerned. People are worried about their health. They're worried about their families. They're worried about the economy. They're worried about their jobs. And people are asking when, if things will ever be normal again. So we're right in the middle of a crisis, and you know that. And the truth is, we've been in the middle of some different crises for a long while. We really have. Our government, most of us, we don't feel good about the government. We know it's divided. We know it's partisan. We know it's dysfunctional. Many of us don't even feel good about the party that we identify with. The media, I don't think we trust the media. I don't. Not even the outlets that tell me what I want to hear. Not even the ones that agree with me. I know they're all trying to sell me a particular political ideology, and I don't like that. I don't feel like I'm getting the truth, even from the ones that tell me things that make me feel right and comfortable. And even worse, well, Rob, what could be worse than the economy and the government and the media? Well, the family. Do you know that about half as many people get divorced every year in this country as get married? And nearly 40% of all the kids in our country are born out of wedlock? Which means that they have a much greater likelihood of growing up in poverty, having a very difficult life, and getting in trouble with the law. More Americans than ever have been diagnosed with anxiety and depression. That was before the pandemic. Since then, those numbers have gone up even more. And fewer people say that religion, that faith, plays any real part in their daily lives. More and more people are not going to church. As a matter of fact, about the only group of people in this country that you can stereotype and make fun of are Christians. The only group that you can ridicule and get away with it. Things are changing. We're in a crisis. Truth is, we're in a number of crises. And I think people feel that. People know that. Even if they can't name it, they sense it. Even if they can't tell you all the reasons why we're in trouble, people know deep down, they know that we are. In this present pandemic, it has just heightened the fact that people are looking for a place to stand. People are looking for a place that is stable and secure and unchanging. It feels like the foundations are crumbling. It feels like the cultural constructs that have held us together, that they are evaporating like the smoke of a fire that once burned bright and now has been extinguished. I believe people are looking for a foundation. They're looking for a place to stand that is stable and sure and unchanging. Now, this weekend, we're beginning a series of messages titled A Place to Stand. And the question that we're going to ask and try to answer is the very same question that David asked nearly 3,000 years ago when he felt that his world was coming apart. This is Psalm 11:3. David wrote, "When the foundations are being destroyed, what can the righteous do?" What can we do to go through this crisis so that we come out stronger and better and closer to God? What can we learn? What do we need to do to grow so that we come out of this time having been a blessing to others? Where can we stand so that we do not fail and we do not fall? I'm going to share with you three foundational thoughts that will set up the rest of the series, and they all have to do with what a crisis will do in our lives. And the first thing to share with you is this: a crisis will reveal who you are. A crisis will give you very good information about who you are and where you are spiritually. So a crisis, by definition, is a time of stress. It's a time that puts pressure on us. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. In fact, it can be a very good thing, because it's only when you're under stress that you really discover who you are, where you're strong and where you're weak. So when you go for your annual physical, and hopefully you go every year, the doctor may listen to your heart, may even order an EKG, but if your doctor is really concerned, he or she will order that you have a stress test. Why? Because it's only when your heart is challenged, it's only when your heart is under stress that you can determine its true condition. And you find out here's where it's strong and here's where it's weak and here's what needs to be done to make it better. And that's what a crisis is. It is a spiritual stress test. It puts pressure on us in such a way that we discover where we're strong, where we're weak. And when things are relatively easy, it is easy to imagine that we're at a different place in our relationship with God than we really are. It's easy to believe that we're stronger than we are, that our faith is more intact than it is. And it's only when we go through these difficult, challenging times, it's only when pressure is put on us that what is inside of us will come out and we can see it for what it is. Look what Jesus said in Matthew chapter 15. He said, "For out of the heart come evil thoughts, murder, adultery, sexual immorality, theft, false testimony, slander." And what Jesus is saying here is that every moral and spiritual decision that we make, it comes out of our heart. It comes out of our character. It reveals what's there within us. And when things are relatively easy, when our life is going relatively well, we're not under stress, we're not under pressure, we can couch our words so that we say things just right. We can catch our actions before they come out and do damage or make us look bad. But under pressure, in the time of crisis, when we are under stress, what's inside comes out just the way it is, unfiltered. And it's then that we get really important information about who we are and where we are. This is not a bad thing, being under stress, being in a time of crisis. It gives us information that those of us that want to follow Jesus better, that want to become more conformed to his image, that want to live in this world so that we're a blessing to others, it gives us really important information about who and where we are. And it's important that we learn who we are, where we are, so that we can grow to be the people that God wants us to be. So over the years, I've often asked people as they've gone through a difficult time, I've said, what have you learned about yourself? And over, people say, I was really surprised. When I went through my crisis, when I went through the most challenging time of my life, I was really surprised what I learned about myself. I remember one man, he was a very successful executive. He was let go unexpectedly, was given a great package, was sent home in a limousine. And for the next week, his wife went off to work, and he was home alone. Nobody called. Nobody needed his advice. Nobody was making him feel important. Nothing to do. And he absolutely cratered. For the next week, his wife was gone, and just about all day, every day, he walked around the house weeping. He said, I was so empty inside. And what I learned about myself is that my identity and my worth was all wrapped up in my work. I learned that without a job, this was the first time in my life I hadn't had a job. Without a job, I didn't know who I was. And I also realized that is incredibly sad. I was surprised that's who I was. I was sad that's who I was. That's very good information to get about yourself. Was it hard? Yeah, he went around, grown man, successful man, he went around his house a whole week weeping. Yes, it was painful to get that information. But it was really good information for him to receive about himself, because that's when his spiritual rebirth began. Other people have said, man, when I went through that difficult time, I learned I was full of pride. I learned I was self-centered. I learned I wasn't nearly as strong as I thought I was. One woman told me, she was an airline pilot. She said, I thought I was really strong. I prided myself on being strong. I always set high goals for myself. I met them all. Every challenge, I was happy to take it on. I was always successful. And then our first child was diagnosed with a heart condition and had to have surgery. I lost our second child in a late-term miscarriage. My marriage began to fail. And I learned that I was as weak and as needy as everybody else. I learned that I needed other people. I learned that it was lonely having to be strong. I learned that I needed a deeper relationship with God. Your crisis, whether it's what we're going through as a nation, as a world, or whether it's your own personal crisis, it's going to give you really important information about yourself. And sometimes we're not going to like what we see, but sometimes we'll be surprised in a different way. Sometimes we're going to learn that there are strengths within us that we didn't know that we had. Several years ago now, I conducted a funeral for a man who was killed by a reckless driver who had been drinking. And he left behind a young wife, and she was there alone to raise their 3 young children. And after some time had passed, I talked with her, and she wrote to me about that experience. About 1.5 years in, she said how devastated she was. I remember the language that she used. She talked about the sheer agony of having bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh ripped away from me. But then she wrote these words. She said, over the next 1.5 years, I learned just how weak and how helpless I am, but I have also learned just how strong the Spirit of God is in me. Again, really good information to receive about yourself. Look, we don't go out and seek trouble. We don't go out and look for problems. We don't hope for a crisis. We don't have to. They come to us. But once they're there, they're painful. They're challenging. But they are so helpful if your goal is to grow more into the image of Jesus, to become closer to God. It gives us information that really helps. It reveals who we are. So think about this crisis that we've been in these past 5 or 6 weeks.